One, two, three. Wow, gave me a start there. Hey, that was 14 seconds of dead air. I hope you all enjoyed it. We're learning as we go here on this podcasting thing. Well, we didn't do any intro music. Guess we don't have to now. And anyway, we're doing our second podcast on Hermetic Temple Radio, the Tarot by Ralph podcast. And today we are going to be talking about listening to the tarot archetypes rather than just listening to dead air. But a lot of people, when they're just beginning to do tarot reading, they'll sit down with a tarot handbook, some sort of instructional book, and they'll try memorizing the definitions of each and every card. And that can seem like a really big task. I know when I first started reading tarot many, many years ago, it seemed like a big task because, I mean, when I got my first deck of cards, I wanted to be, just like the other professional tarot readers out there. I wanted to know exactly what the card meant and how to interpret it and just be giving readings. But it takes some time to get used to the cards, to understand what they are saying to you. And the first step that a lot of people take, and this is a perfect place to start, is that they'll sit down with a tarot manual, a tarot instruction book, and they'll begin to try to memorize the different meanings of all 78 cards. And that's one way you can do it. It's a good way to kind of get your feet wet in tarot reading. But now there's another way that you can build a closer, deeper relationship with the tarot cards, and that is to listen to the tarot archetypes. Now, archetypes are like universal patterns that are out there. I used to think of them as universal concepts, but I think they're more than just concepts. They're more than just constructs. Carl Jung, the psychologist, and I think we can also call him sort of a Gnostic philosopher, really pioneered the study of the archetypes. And if you've ever read his Red Book, there's a book that very few people out there have read, even Jungian students, Jungian psychologists and analysts. It's called the Red Book, and it is an interesting read. It's very deep. And in it, he records some of the interactions that he had with the archetypes of his understanding. And it seems pretty obvious after having gone through the Red Book that Carl Jung did not consider the archetypes as simply constructs or as just some figments of the collective imagination. He tended to think of them, I believe, as living beings that exist in another realm, a realm that we can access in our subconscious and unconscious minds. And I believe, too, that we can access this realm through the act of meditation. But they are living beings, not flesh and blood like we are, but different. And the whole collective human race has access to these archetypes. In the pagan world, the pagan way of thinking, we might call them gods, goddesses. In the Judeo-Christian, the Abrahamic faiths, we might call them angels, archangels, or demons even, because some of these archetypes can be dark. But they do exist, and we do have access to them. Now, I'm going to give you a few specific examples of the archetypes and how notable people have, gotten into contact with these archetypes and used them professionally. So one example of the archetype is like the fool or the innocent. And in tarot, we have the Fool card. And the fool or the innocent is like a young person, a young boy, young girl, young person that starts out on a journey. And usually this journey is known as the hero's journey. But kind of think of Luke Skywalker in the Star Wars trilogy, or Rey, in the new version of the Star Wars saga. And, Luke starts out pretty foolish. I mean, he's a young boy doing chores around the family farm, and one day something happens. He takes a journey to find a droid that wandered off, and while he's gone, his family is slaughtered by stormtroopers. He stumbles across Obi-Wan Kenobi, another archetype there, the wise one, the wizard, the teacher, Obi-Wan Kenobi there, and Luke, the fool, the innocent, off on his journey of self-discovery, encounters Obi-Wan Kenobi and is prepared by Obi-Wan Kenobi to start off on the fool's journey, going from the fool to becoming a hero. And I mean, that's the first 3 Star Wars movies kind of fit that pattern. Young Luke goes off, half-cocked, learns the ways of the Force, learns how to become a Jedi, and slowly his skills grow, his techniques grow, and then he finds a new master, Yoda, and Yoda teaches him a little bit more how to become a better Jedi. But Luke, the young fool, still acts kind of foolish, impulsive, doesn't make the wisest decisions, behaves rather rashly at times, makes some mistakes, but he learns from those mistakes along the way, until finally, by the time we get to the 3rd movie of the original Star Wars trilogy, Luke is a master Jedi, and he's ready to face down anything that comes his way. And in Return of the Jedi, he defeats the Empire, and everybody lives happily ever after until the next part of the trilogy begins. So, there you have in that story, you've got one example of the fool or the innocent, the young person that starts on a journey, doesn't really know what they're doing in the beginning. They kind of fall down. They learn on the way. They learn from their mistakes. And that's a universal archetype. Every culture on the face of the earth understands that archetype. On planet Earth, we have many different cultures, many different races, different skin colors, different religions, but even amongst these different religions and nationalities and ethnicities, we have that same archetype present. That's why we call them the universal archetype. You can see these archetypes in the Bible. You can see these archetypes in the Bhagavad Gita. You can see these archetypes pretty much anywhere, in any religious literature, in any secular literature. And not just Star Wars follows this pattern, but every, adventure novel you can think of follows that basic pattern. It's a universal pattern that we all have access to, and no matter what culture you live in, you can probably think of examples of, the innocent that starts out on a journey, and the teacher, the master, the sorcerer, the magician, the wise sage that helps the young fool along their way, trains them, teaches them, and helps them along on their path, and helps them undertake that fool's journey, or the hero's quest, the fool's quest to become a hero. And we see that in every culture. And I believe, this is my belief anyway, that these archetypes are so universal that if we were to encounter a new race of intelligent beings, not of this world, but from another sphere, another world, another realm, another planet, maybe even another galaxy far, far away, we would find that some of our archetypes that's present in our literature, in our holy books, in our culture, would also be represented in their literature, in their holy books, and in their cultures. That's how universal I believe these archetypes are. Now, there's could be a lot of disagreement out there on that point, but yeah, that's my belief anyway. That's been, can't really say my experience because I haven't come into close personal contact with aliens, but I believe that if we did, that we would probably find that out to be true. Now, when it comes to these archetypes, again, I believe that we can encounter them as if they were living beings. A lot of people out there in the metaphysical realm speak in those terms, that like specifically in the tarot, not to deal with the tarot as if they're just 78 cards, but to deal with them as if they are living beings. And I interpret that belief in just by way of the archetypes, that each card is inspired by a particular archetype, maybe more than one archetype. Several archetypes can be seen in different cards. And that if when we open our heart, our mind, our subconscious to be able to listen to these archetypes, that we can begin to see deeper meanings in the tarot cards, and also deeper meanings into our own lives. Now, another person that worked with the archetypes, I mean, you think of any artist out there, any writer, any poet. I think all the creative people have been dealing with the archetypes, at least unawares, maybe consciously, maybe subconsciously. But one guy that I believe worked with the archetypes on at least an unconscious or subconscious level was Stan Lee of Marvel Comics fame. I listened to an interview given by Stan Lee from, I think it was the 1970s, and he was being interviewed about how they did Marvel Comics, and he got talking about the character Thor. And he said, you know, I've gotten a lot of people that have written me, and they've said, hey, Stan, you've done a marvelous job on this character Thor. I mean, you guys really have a deep understanding of Viking religion and culture. And he laughed. And he said, you know, honestly, we have about as much understanding of Viking culture as we do brain surgery. And he laughed it off, and he said, you know, we're no experts on Viking theology or Nordic culture. You know, we're just a bunch of guys using our imagination, and sometimes we get it right. But what I think may have been going on there is that by taking that character, Thor, a character that doesn't just exist in the Marvel Comics universe, but a character that existed, a mythological character that existed in of course, in ancient times in the Nordic culture, in the Viking religion. And I believe that by using their imagination and thinking about Thor and how to present Thor in a 20th century world, now a 21st century world, but back then a 20th century understanding, that either consciously or unconsciously they began to channel this archetype. And that may be why every once in a while they got a few things right when it came to Viking religion and the Nordic culture. And of course other times I think they just added stuff in out of their own imagination, out of our 20th century and now 21st century paradigms and ways of understanding. But, you know, that's the beauty of archetypes. They are like, what does archetype actually mean in the original Greek? I used to know this, I've forgotten it, but I think it means like something like the original pattern or the prototype, the original. And that's what these archetypes are. It's like the original pattern that pre-exists. Some people would say they go back as far as humanity. I think they pre-exist humanity, and that there are other cultures that have dealt with them, not of this world. Don't want to get too far out there, but I believe these prototypes, these first patterns, exist long before you or me, and they go back hundreds of years, thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, probably older than that. But what we do when we encounter the archetypes, what the first peoples did when they encountered the archetypes, they met them on their own terms, understood them, and then they added things to them from their own cultural viewpoint and awareness and understanding. And as the ages wore on, as one generation morphed into the next, and morphed into the next generation, and so on and so forth, each generation added something to these archetypal figures, and we dressed them up the way we thought they should be dressed up, so to speak, and our different understandings grew, and we went from, like, Thor being the god of thunder to being this blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy with a great sense of humor that likes to throw his hammer around and crack jokes and see if he can get the girls, too. But, we add something to these archetypes. These are like the original patterns, but we add our own particular flair to these patterns. And we make them our own as time goes by. And so there's a lot of latitude that we can have with these archetypes. And I think Stan Lee and the other writers at Marvel Comics, most likely they may not have been aware of it, or they may have been deeply aware of it, but I think that they were channeling these archetypes, listening to these archetypes, and then the archetypes would be speaking to them in their own unconscious mind, in their own intuition, and their own imagination, and then they'd sit down and they'd write a comic book episode, or write a screenplay or whatever, and just let that old archetype come to life in the 20th century and 21st century realms. And so that's how archetypes, kind of in a nutshell, have influenced artistic people and creators, down through the centuries. And at first they inspired simple shepherds who are out watching their flocks and thinking about, loftier things, trying to understand the universe and their place in the universe. And they began to encounter these archetypes. Sometimes they understood them as gods, goddesses. Sometimes they would be understood as angels. The supreme archetype would be understood as being the higher power, the highest power, the supreme deity. And then there'd be a lot of minor archetypes that would come into play. And that framework of understanding has grown throughout the millennia and has been handed down to us today in one form or another. Now, we can touch on a few of the archetypes, and then we're going to take a musical break, but you've got like the emperor, the ruler, the good leader. You've got like the sage, the philosopher, the magician. You've got the wizard. You've got like the wife. You've got like the father, the son, the daughter, the innocent. What other archetypes are there? I don't have my list in front of me right now, but there's many different archetypes out there. The warrior, the soldier, the hero, the rebel, the outlaw archetype in every culture out there. Even amongst the angels, you got the angels of light that do good things and say yes and no to their heavenly Father. And then you got the fallen angel, the rebel angel that just flips his finger at the divine and says, I'm going to do what I think is right and go my own way. So even in the angelic realms, you've got that example of the rebel archetype. And there's many other archetypes out there. The caregiver is an archetype, again, in every single culture out there. Justice as, an abstract is there, the Lady of Justice. Just many different archetypes out there, and you can look up to Google Carl Jung, and specifically Carl Jung archetypes, and just see the list of the 12 common archetypes that Carl Jung tended to work with. And there's more archetypes than just that, and you can think of them in a variety of different ways. In tarot, we got 78 cards. Each card, you can see at least one archetype in each card. And that's the beauty of being able to meditate on the tarot cards once you have established a basic connection with the cards. Once you get a basic understanding of the cards, then you can meditate on the cards and get a feeling, not just head knowledge, but heart knowledge. Get a feeling for what archetypes may exist, may be represented by that particular card, and then open up your subconscious to be able to deal with that archetype on a more conscious level. So that's going to be all for now. We're going to take a short break, and then I'll come back with to wrap this up. This is, I thought we were talking about the archetypes, so we'd go ahead and play a song, Christmas song, Angels We Have Heard on High. And we'll be back after this. Remembering to unmute myself first, and we are back. Now, I just gave you a kind of a thumbnail sketch of how I view the archetypes. Like to come out and say, of course, my view is just my view. Some people may share it. Some people may be dead set against it. They may see things some other way. I tend to view life more from the eyes of a spiritual, person. I used to be very religious. Now I fall into the category of spiritual but not religious. But it's very easy for me to think of these things in the terms of the supernatural, the spiritual, as well as the natural realm. Now, there are other folks out there that will take the archetypes and try to interpret them more as psychological phenomena, mental constructs, ideas, and that works for them. These are people that come from more of a materialistic and atheistic viewpoint of the world. And, we have those people that some of them read tarot, and they do a darn good job of reading tarot from their perspective. My perspective is my perspective. It works for me. It's right for me. But I don't try to go around saying that I'm right, you're wrong, and you should do things my way. That's another beauty of the tarot, is that we have people from all different backgrounds. Each person bringing their own particular thing to the table, their own particular expertise, and they read tarot in their own light, by the light of their own experience. And that's what I want to encourage people out there to do. Don't just try to copy a good tarot reader and try to be a carbon copy of that person. Be yourself. Speak in your own voice. Bring what you have to the table as a tarot reader, and bring out your own unique contribution to this hermetic art. Don't just be a carbon copy, a clone of somebody else. Our experiences are our experiences. My experience will not exactly match your experiences. We will differ from different viewpoints and different experiential backgrounds, and that's the way it should be. So be your own person, do tarot your own way, and that's why I like to recommend that, people don't just sit down with a good tarot book. I don't care how good that tarot book is. Don't just sit down and memorize an entire book and then think that you're going to be a good tarot reader. Because the tarot book is going to give you somebody else's interpretation of all these things, of all these matters. And where you really start to come into your own as a mystic, as a tarot reader, as a human being, is when you take this knowledge from other people, this knowledge that has been handed down to us through the millennia, and then you start giving it your own twist, your own interpretation, and bring your own understanding to the table and start making your own contribution to this collective source of knowledge. And so that's what I like to encourage people to do in anything, but especially when we're talking about tarot. Do your reading, but then also sit down, meditate on the cards, get to know these archetypes, come to a deeper understanding of the cards and the archetypes, and see how they speak to you. If they speak to you as living beings, like I believe they did with Carl Jung, as I know they do with me, then that's great. Flow with it, go with it. If to you they're just constructs, mental constructs, stuff that's just all in your mind, that's good too. That can work. It's just however you see it, however you're able to understand it. Because in tarot, as in many different fields, we start at a certain level of understanding. And then we learn, we add to that level, and we grow from that level. When I first started reading tarot, I mean, I was a very, very religious person. I was going into the Roman Catholic priesthood, or so I thought. And I mean, that was my whole life. It was about religion. And tarot, I was interpreting tarot in the light of Catholic Christianity and Christian Hermeticism. And over the last several decades, I've added to that. My journey has taken me away from religion and in more of a universalist pattern, more of a universalist approach. I'm now consider myself spiritual but not religious anymore. My wife tends to be more of an atheist. And I mean, I've dealt with people that come from the atheist background. And I mean, as a religious person, I used to think that atheists would be anti-spiritual. There wouldn't be anything spiritual about an atheist. And then, especially in the Buddhist tradition, I've come across atheists that are deeply spiritual. And it's just the way that they understand the universe, the way that they deal with the universe. We are finite beings. The universe is infinite. The supreme being, if you believe in such a thing, is infinite. The archetypes are a form of like infinite, I think infinite beings, but you know, there's a lot more to the archetypes than what one person I think can fully and deeply and completely comprehend and understand. But we are limited finite beings trying to understand the infinite. And of course, it's like trying to put the entire ocean into one small glass of water. It can't be done. You can understand a part of it. You can get the gist for it mentally. But I mean, you really can't fit the entire ocean into one glass of water. But if you immerse yourself into the entire ocean, you swim out into it, become one with it, you can begin to more fully, deeply understand that ocean just by not seeking to understand it with your head, but try to become one with it, you know, mind, body, and soul. And just make sure you don't drown, though. And if you can't swim, I wouldn't recommend doing that. Play it safe, people. But, you know, that's just a small example of how I see, you know, the universe and our place in the universe. We're all just individual people in the material realm trying to make sense of things. And as we go, we add to our understanding. We come to a deeper understanding of things, but I think we still have to have that humility. No matter how far we have gone on our journey, we don't know it all. We haven't experienced it all. And people that are coming up, people younger than us, people older than us, people that come from different backgrounds and cultures, they will add something to the journey, something to that understanding that previously just escaped us. And you just have to have the humility, no matter how far advanced you get in anything, to understand that, you know, you don't know it all. And I mean, that's okay, because, you know, we all have something to add in this great scheme of the universe. And we just have to play our part and let other people play their parts and listen, not just to the archetypes, not just to the tarot cards, but listen to one another who are trying to share their life experiences. Not judge them and say, well, you're evil because you don't understand things the same way I do. Just say you're different, and that's good. Viva la différence. Okay, that's all for today. We are going to wrap this up. We're going to be doing the Tarot by Ralph podcast at least weekly. I'll be doing it on Wednesday. And I think I will try doing it live. Now, next broadcast, we're going to shoot for 3 o'clock next Wednesday. I'm going to write that time down, and I'm going to try to remember to unmute my microphone in the very beginning. But anyway, thanks for dropping by. If you have any questions that you would like to ask me, you can catch me on my main website at www.tarotbyralph.com. And I think I'm going to put the email link into the program description of this video. And would love to know your questions, any feedback that you have, and I'll answer them as best I can. So until next week, this is Ralph signing out. Thanks for dropping by. We'll catch you all later.